China and Russia announced a new partnership, with China saying it'll back Russia's foreign policy aims and saying it supports Russian demands that NATO halt its expansion.
Let's bring you up to date with the pandemic. We've just heard that more than half of the European population are expected to contract Omicron in the next 2 months.
China has announced its biggest citywide lockdown since the COVID outbreak began more than 2 years ago.
Prince Andrew and Virginia Giuffre, the woman who'd accused him of sexual assault, have reached an out-of-court settlement.
Russia has deployed around 100,000 troops at the border, but denies that it's planning to invade.
The United States and Britain have threatened Russia with immediate sanctions.
Dawn in a European capital. A missile hits a block of flats. The Russians aren't advancing as fast as many thought they would, but the Ukrainian military remains outnumbered.
These are the people who didn't want to leave, thinking they could stick it out, that the bombs might stop. But they didn't stop, and more than 3.5 million refugees later, there's a growing feeling of the long term about this.
As time passes in this war, it's clear Russian forces are gradually stepping up the severity of their attacks and bombardments.
Well, the conflict in Ukraine and the sanctions on Russia have led to another surge in the cost of oil and gas.
There was a stark warning today that a conflict 1,500 miles away could have devastating economic consequences here in the UK.
Ukraine's wheat helps to feed the world. But while most of its ports remain closed, much of it is beyond the world's reach.
And in the last few minutes, Number 10 has confirmed that Boris Johnson has received the questionnaire from the Metropolitan Police.
Firstly, I want to say sorry. Mr. Speaker, I want to apologise.
I once again offer a full apology.
Well, the UK's most senior police officer is going to leave her job. She's been blamed for a string of failures in the Metropolitan Police, including a culture of misogyny and discrimination.
Those who travel to the UK by illegal and dangerous routes, including by small boats across the Channel, may be relocated to Rwanda.
The policy faces a judicial review in July, and while that process plays out, many people are still cramming into small inflatable boats and making the journey from France to England.
In their latest report, UN scientists are warning we are on course for devastating changes to our climate. Emissions of greenhouse gases need to peak within the next 3 years if we're to stave off the worst effects of climate change.
It's called a genocide because it's become clearer and clearer that Putin is just trying to wipe out the idea of even being able to be a Ukrainian.
Come with Ukrainian symbols to support Ukraine, to support freedom, to support life.
The unannounced talks came as Britain pledged 120 armoured vehicles and new anti-ship missile systems.
His war crimes have permanently polluted his reputation.
76% of Finns want to join the military alliance. Why? Because they've seen Russia's aggression in Ukraine.
Russia's worst nightmare appears to be unfolding in eastern Ukraine. It could be their gravest setback since the failure to capture Kyiv back in March.
Mr. Putin confirmed plans to mobilise 300,000 reservists to boost his badly depleted force.
And how's that gone down? The announcement has prompted some protests in Russia and a spike in demand for plane tickets abroad.
How to break arm became the top Google trend as Russians face conscription.
It's become clear over the last few hours that Kherson now belongs to the Ukrainians.
The US man's become the first person in the world to get a heart transplant from a genetically modified pig.
Today sees the start of what's thought to be the world's biggest ever trial of a 4-day working week.
The Justice for Johnny hashtag has been used in countless videos, garnering billions of views.
It was a big weekend of celebrations across the country to mark the Queen's Platinum Jubilee. There were lots of events, including a concert, a massive parade and thousands of street parties.
The Queen, Platinum Jubilee, Commander-in-Chief. And here she comes.
Football really is coming home. England's Lionesses won that fantastic match against Germany to win the Women's Euros.
Honestly, it's amazing. This is what dreams are made of.
Her goal in extra time saw England's women lift a major trophy for the first time in their history.
And the UK is experiencing its hottest ever day after the Met Office issued a red extreme heat warning.
What? I'm terribly sorry, we have to stop there. Rishi Sunak has resigned, the Chancellor has resigned, that is it.
And I want you to know how sad I am to be giving up the best job in the world.
but them's the breaks.
Even in hospital, she danced and documented her life. Deborah James devoted her final years to campaigning for fellow cancer patients.
These girls are chanting "Death to the Dictator," which is aimed at Iran's supreme leader. And as they know, by removing their headscarves, they're breaking Iranian law. But the protests keep coming. They began with the death of Mahsa Amini after she was arrested by Iran's morality police. They've become a direct challenge to those in power.
The impact of it is frankly catastrophic. What we need is a willingness to take action and to grasp this, to make sure there are millions of people in this country who don't face the choice between starvation and freezing this winter.
I give notice that Liz Truss is elected as the leader of the Conservative and Unionist Party.
Despite being the shortest-serving Prime Minister in British history, she still clocked up an impressive array of policy U-turns.
We will reverse almost all the tax measures announced in the growth plan.
Gone, 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 gone.
Parts of our mini-budget went further and faster than markets were expecting.
I am a fighter and not a quitter.
I am resigning.
There we have it. It looks like Danielle, the lettuce, outlasted the Prime Minister.
This is BBC News from London. Buckingham Palace has announced the death of Her Majesty Queen Elizabeth II. In a statement, the palace said the Queen died peacefully at Balmoral this afternoon. The King and the Queen Consort will remain at Balmoral this evening and will return to London tomorrow.
But 250,000 people personally saw the late Queen lie in state, with 25 million in the UK alone watching yesterday's events unfold on TV.
Leaders from around the world were also there, more than 500, with kings, queens, presidents and prime ministers. Crowds continued to line the roads and pay tribute. And after that, Queen Elizabeth II was laid to rest. Queen for 70 years, it is now the end of an era for the UK and the beginning of a new one.
I speak to you today with feelings of profound sorrow.
It is the greatest privilege of my life to be able to serve the party I love and give back to the country I owe so much to.
The world's richest man usually gets his way, but in this case, it appears his hands have been tied.
And that's Elon Musk. He's changed his mind about buying Twitter again and is now willing to go ahead with his takeover.
Inflation figures for November have just been published. You might want to look away now.
But while our household bills are soaring, energy firms are making record profits.
Health workers on strike in Northern Ireland at the beginning of a week of disruption across the UK that will impact almost everyone in some way.
We work long hours, we're underpaid, we're understaffed, we can't deliver the service that we should be delivering.
This is a World Cup that's practically been built on modern slavery. One dad said his son was worked to death on £1 an hour by Qatar World Cup stadium firm.
As the rest of the world opens up again and returns to normal, critics of the Chinese government say they've had enough. It's all to do with COVID and the control China's government has over its population.
The Duke and Duchess of Sussex have levelled their most explosive and damaging criticisms yet against the royal family.
Reportedly, $100 million is what they've got from Netflix to do this series.
No one knows the full truth. We know the full truth.
The Supreme Court in Britain has ruled that the Scottish Parliament does not have the power to hold a second referendum on independence.
For the first time in the Ukrainian conflict, a Russian missile is said by US intelligence to have landed in territory under NATO protection.
England fall agonisingly short in the World Cup.
Harry Kane equalised for England with this penalty. But the England captain missed a second penalty and France went on to win 2-1.
Penalty heartache, even without a shootout. The hurt continues for England.